Welcome to your community. This is your hometown. This is Walton Entertainment. This is where you can hear from the community and those making a difference. We explore topics, local festivals, arts and entertainment, and local news. For this program and much more, visit us online at yourlocalstream.com. That's yourlocalstream.com.
Another of his children, this lady right here, Louise Walker, was married to Bob McWhirter, University of Georgia's first All-American. And this is the house where they lived. It's at the corner of Davis Street and South Broad Street. This is a picture of Billington and his wife, Alice Mitchell Walker. This appeared in the Atlanta paper when their son, Clifford, had been elected governor. Now, B.S. Walker was a native son, and he was graduated from the University of Georgia and was a lawyer. He never sought political office and never held political office. But what he did do for this town, this community, are legend. He was a leader in acquiring the first railroad to come to Monroe. He was founder and one of the founders and president of the Bank of Monroe, which today is Synovus Bank. He remained president of the bank until he died. He was one of the organizers and served as president of the Monroe Cotton Mill. He was the first president of the Cotton Manufacturers Association of Georgia. In 1924, the residents of Monroe named him our first citizen. He did a lot of other stuff for his church and for the community, and like some other citizens that we have had and I've read about and all, what they did was never known until they were gone. You know, it was done behind the scenes, and there was no hoopla or whatever about it. Just a good fellow. And he was of course very well off, and sometimes we are kind of cynical about things like that, but this gentleman used what he had for the good of the community. Richard Russell. Well, everybody knows Richard Russell was from Wyandotte, Barry County, Georgia. Wrong. Barry County didn't exist until 1914, and Richard Russell was born in 1897, I believe. So he was born in Walton County. Before Barry County existed, Jackson County, Gwinnett, and Walton came together just about in the middle of Wyandotte there. And so Governor Russell was born in Walton County. He went on to become a member of the Georgia House of Representatives and then governor of Georgia in 1931 to 33. He was U.S. Senator for 38 years from 1933 to 1971. During that time, he was chairman of the Armed Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee and served as President Pro Tem of the Senate. The Russell Senate Building bears his name. All right. Richard Hubbard was governor, but not of Georgia. Richard was born down here too. He was born a little further south than Martha Lumpkin was born. He might have been on the Social Circle Highway rather than Broad Street, but it's all the same thing. Richard Hubbard, after being born in Monroe, moved. I think actually they might have moved to New York. But anyway, he wound up as governor of Texas. He was governor of Texas from 1876 to 1879. And Texas likes things big. Well, Richard did not disappoint. He was the largest governor Texas ever had, at somewhere over 400 pounds.
Wow.
And a really good governor, I've read. He did a lot for Texas. Getting away from the governors and talking about some other people that have lived here and done things of worth that mattered. Moyna Michael's got to be close to the top of that list. Moyna Michael, known as a Poppy Lady, was born in this house in Good Hope. By the time she was 15 years old, she was teaching school. When the Monroe school system was founded, which was in 1906, we actually have the minutes of the meeting the first day the school board existed. They had the election that day, and decided to support a school system. And so Monroe's school system existed in 1906, and it was not that first meeting, but shortly thereafter, one or two meetings after that, that Moena Michael and 2 or 3 of her sisters were hired as teachers for the Monroe school system. She taught at Monroe High School. She established the poppy drive, where you would, selling is the wrong word, but she gave out silk poppies, and today they're plastic, I think, and in return people would make donations to that drive, and to date that drive has raised over $2 billion for veterans benefits. She has her own United States postage stamp, and during World War II she had a Liberty ship that bore her name. She's buried in Rest Haven Cemetery. Dr. Rufus Harris was a native son of Monroe. He graduated from Mercer University and became the dean of Tulane's School of Law. And following that, he became president of Tulane University. And then, in his memoirs say, he retired to become president of his alma mater, Mercer. And he is only one of 3 Mercer presidents that have called Monroe home. Pinckney Daniel Pollock actually came to Monroe to die. He was not from here, but he was married to Eva Selman, who was the daughter of George Selman. George Selman owned the big white house on the hill on McDaniel Street. He had gotten that from Waters Briscoe, and actually George's wife was Waters' daughter. And then Eva Selman married Pinckney Daniel Pollock while he was president of Mercer. He became very ill, had to resign, and they came back and lived at the house on McDaniel Street, and that's where he passed away. Also, Gustavus Alonzo Nunley was a Baptist preacher and an educator. He was a preacher of the First Baptist Church here, I think, for 12 years, and preached at other Baptist churches in Walton and surrounding counties. He was also, I can't remember exactly, but he served as maybe superintendent of schools for Walton County. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's right. And went on to become president of Mercer University. Eleanor Ison Franklin, both of her parents were educators. You might have seen there's a street in North Monroe called Rose Ison. That's her mother. Rose was her mother. But she was valedictorian of her class at Carver High School in 1944 at the age of 14. She went on to Spelman College and graduated magna cum laude, and then went on to be the head of the Howard University School of Medicine. She was the first female medical school president in the United States. Judge Thomas Giles is, I would say responsible, but very close to being responsible for building our historic courthouse. He was the county ordinary. He accumulated the funds. He organized the building committee and led in the meetings that they had leading up to the building and dedication of the historic courthouse. In addition to that, he gave land and money to start the A&M school at Walker Park. If you're not familiar with that, it's another story. It's a fascinating story. The school up there was a big part of this community, and it opened, I think, about 1906. He gave 100 acres of land and $5,000. That was a lot of money in 1906, and a lot of land too. But in addition to that, he set up an educational fund to provide financing for college educations for Walton County students that couldn't afford those. And that fund still gives money to students today. It has changed names, so I think it's part of the Walker Fund now, but still providing money to kids who need it to go to college. So let's talk a little more about our historic courthouse. We mentioned the fact that Bruce and Morgan designed the courthouse, and it had a dome when it was built. And there's another courthouse that's it's twin, and that courthouse is located in Monroe, North Carolina. It's still used as their courthouse. It still has its dome, and additions have been made on the sides, but we've never seen the dome on our courthouse, that is until last week, when Larry Witcher called me up, and I was working desperately to try to finish this program, and Larry said, "Are you busy?" And I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Well, I got something I'd like to show you when you got time. Don't worry about it. It's just a picture of the courthouse." And I said, "Has it got the dome on it?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "I'll be there in a minute." And so what Larry, and this thing, he had this for 15 years, but he couldn't find it. So what it is a postcard. And it's not a photograph, but it's an artist rendering of the Walton County Courthouse. And this postcard was postmarked in October of 1883. That's 8 months after the courthouse was completed. And the dome is right there, complete with clock. And the postcard is addressed to Governor McDaniel in Atlanta. Just a little closer look at this is the oldest photograph we have at the courthouse, and that was made sometime between 1906 and 1910. This fire hydrant right here tells us it's after 1906, and the fact that the other clock hadn't been put in it yet tells us it's before 1910. When the clock was put in, B.S. Walker had it put in. So, another thing that most people don't know. But we're glad to have this. Sure are. It was exciting to me. I know most people don't get as excited about stuff like that as I do. All right, we're going to talk about a few more people of note in Monroe. We're going to start with Peanut Man. We've had 3 Peanut men in Monroe. The first that I know of was Jesse Johnson, who was called the Goober Man. Jesse died in 1941, so it's unlikely that anybody here today remembers him. But most of us who've lived here a while would remember Will Malcolm. Will would walk Broad Street with his sack over his shoulder and sell peanuts, parched peanuts they would call. And he even got on the bus, he'd go to Athens and sell peanuts. And over there, actually, they had Will Malcolm Day in Athens one time. And then Brent Malcolm, actually Brent sold everything, but he did sell peanuts for quite a while and became Monroe's Peanut Man. Charles M. Walker developed Monlin Place, which is Boulevard. It was Monroe's first organized neighborhood. And he was also, he and his wife paid to have a 3rd story added to the First Baptist Church's Sunday School edition, and also paid to furnish that. George Nunley was the first Monroe boy killed in World War II. And George had volunteered for the Rangers, and he was wounded in Italy and recovered from that wound. He got, of course, the Purple Heart, and he also received the Silver Star for that. He rejoined his unit shortly after the landing at Anzio, and in an effort to overrun or take over a Nazi stronghold, he and his whole company, except for 6 men, were killed. Robert Lee Bob Nowell Jr. was an extraordinary golfer, played golf with Bobby Jones and others, but he also was kind of like B.S. Walker. He did a lot for the community behind the scenes, and especially for young people in the community. In 1956 or 7, when they were remodeling the old armory to be a rec center, the students of Monroe High School decided to name it now a recreation center in his honor. Michael Etchison was the first Monroe policemen killed in the line of duty. George Selman, who we mentioned briefly a while ago, was a driving force behind Monroe's development, especially business development. He was one of the founders of our first corporation, the Monroe Guiana Company, which went on to be the Monroe Oil and Fertilizer Company. And Joseph Felker, this gentleman right here, was a lawyer and a judge. He gave the land for the first Monroe High School on Church Street, where Pilot Park is today. And let's see, this little girl right here is Allie Felker, who married J.R. Nunley, and after his death, she actually ran Nunley Lumber Company on Church Street. Some of you probably remember her. Very gracious lady. Eulalia Gober Nunley was married to W.H. Nunley. She was born in Jefferson, Georgia, and she was very well educated and refined, and she married this gentleman. This is their 50th wedding anniversary, W.H. Nunley, and moved to Good Hope and lived on the farm. She never lived on the farm in life, didn't know anything about farming. But she survived. She managed the household of the farm, and actually wrote articles for the Atlanta Constitution about farm life and about Reconstruction in Georgia after the war. And she's really the first person that I've heard called a historian for Monroe and Walton County. Very active in a lot of the women's service clubs and all. Ernest Camp was publisher of the Tribune for over half a century. He came to Monroe and went to work for the Tribune as editor, and I think 1 year later bought it and managed it up until about 1957 when he passed away. And that's another man that we'll never know what all he did for this community, because the situation he had in life put him in touch with influential people like President Roosevelt, who came to Warm Springs, Georgia on a fairly regular basis and was pretty good friends with Ernest Camp. And you can be in people's ear and get things done that you can't do through formal channels, and I think he did a good bit of that for our community. These two people we wouldn't have any of this stuff I'm telling you right now if it wasn't for these two people, Anita Butt Sams, who wrote our fantastic county history, Wayfarers in Walton. I can sit in front of this computer and click my mouse 3 times and find anything in the world that exists about Monroe. If she wanted to find anything about Monroe, she had to get in the car and drive to Atlanta to the archives, which she did on, I won't say a daily basis, but she spent a lot of time. I sometimes think she probably had a room up there, not sure. And E.M. Carnes came to Monroe about 1903 on his way to Florida and fell in love and never left. He took pictures of Monroe from 1903 up into the 1950s when he retired and started selling snow cones on his front porch to kids like me that were waiting to get in the Troy Theater. But we have hundreds of his photographs, and thanks to Larry Witcher, who was in the right place at the right time, and Larry has all of Mr. Carnes' photographic equipment. We have a good bit of it on display at the museum, and he has the rest, and he's been very generous in letting us access that. Morris Mendel immigrated from Russia in 1905 to New York, and then shortly thereafter came to Monroe as a peddler, going door to door selling. He and his wife had 10 children, and they organized or amassed or whatever kind of a business empire here. We had Mendel's Grocery, Mendel's Hardware, Mendel's Dry Good, Mendel's Service Station, and his 10 children carried on after him. And they were one of, when he came to town in it'd be about 1910 probably, I think there was one other Jewish family in town. And those were the only two. General George J. Hearn Jr. Had a career in the National Guard that spanned 5 decades, and he was the Adjutant General of Georgia, which is the leader of the National Guard for the state. He was Adjutant General under 5 different governors. That's 5 different politicians that somehow or another he kept happy, or close to it. Harry Lanius and his wife Sally were instrumental in starting the General Charitable Foundation, which had, for one thing, funded the printing of Wayfarers in Walton. It's changed names now, but it still provides grants for many worthwhile organizations and efforts, one being the Monroe Museum.
You forgot Michael Greer.
And Michael Greer, where is he?
Go back.
Oh, I just went right over Michael Greer. Michael Greer, born and raised in Monroe, went to Monroe High School, and became I would say almost a world famous interior designer. He designed rooms in the White House for Mamie Eisenhower and Jackie Kennedy, and he had an office, or rather a business, and an apartment on Fifth Avenue in New York, and did designs for movie stars and all those famous folks like that. Okay, moving right along. Harry Lanius and his wife sat. We talked about them. All right. Miss Bessie Cooper, who was a teacher for her whole professional life, went on to become renowned for the fact that she was the oldest living person in the world at the age of 116. And Thomas R. Breedlove, who started Breedlove Dairy north of Monroe up here. A lot of us drank Breedlove's milk when we were in school. And he was the first president of the Walton EMC and was elected to the Georgia Agricultural Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about some events now. And the first is fire. In 1857, Monroe burned all the way from Spring Street, right here, all the way down to Washington Street, which is out of this picture then. And this picture is long after, this is the oldest picture we got of downtown, but this is about 1910 or so. So we're talking 50 years before this picture. But everything was wooden then, and it all burned. We didn't have a fire department. Some people saved some of their inventory from stores and such, but the town burned down and was rebuilt in brick, which was a good thing, I guess. This was B.F. Stringer's business. He sold harnesses and shoes and leather goods there. He later moved his business to North Broad and sold out to Carl Saw's shoe store, which is the little brick store. It's a beauty parlor now up on north end of Broad Street. And dry goods, this was James Day's business, and all this eventually became Aycock's department store. This was Arnold Kelly. There's 3 names in here. And I can't remember, but anyway, we're going. This says dry goods. It was not. This is Breedlove's Hardware, and this was Farmers Bank on the corner. And one other thing worth noting is this little building right back here, which is the first city hall that we know existed. This was a city hall before 1907. It was a little 2-story building with all the mayor's office and all upstairs. Downstairs was the jail. In 1906, this building over here at the corner of Spring Street and Wayne Street was built, and it was the city hall. It's still there. I don't know if there's anything in there now. There's been a church in there for a while, but if you look at the front of the building, you can see there's a garage, like a garage door that's been bricked up, but that was where the fire truck went. Fire department's downstairs, and the city offices and upstairs, and in the back was the jail. If you look on the back end of that building. You can see there's a big steel door back there, and all the windows are small and up high. That part was the calaboose or jail. All right, in 1960, Acock's department store burned. That was a very spectacular fire. The Acock's brothers sold that business after that to the Milner brothers in Gainesville, and it became Milner Acock's, and was in business for probably a couple of decades after that. Today, it's the city court and the police department, but I think they're in the process of moving. Monroe High School. This school right here, built in 1928, and let me get my bearings. It's that right here, right up the hill, and faced Bow Springs Avenue. It burned in 1936. It was replaced in 1938 by this building, which then burned in 1976. By the time it burned, it was a junior high school and an elementary school behind it. This part that you can still see up here didn't burn in that fire. It's still there, but this part did in 76. Other eventful things. We had a tornado in 1973 that struck. These pictures are made out on Walton Road, I think. And in 1993, we found out what a downburst was. And they tell me a downburst is like a tornado, but it rolls this way instead of vertically. These pictures were made after the downburst in 1993, and you can see that this is the art guild now, and those trees just twisted in half, and the museum. This is the Walton Hotel. This whole side of the building fell on top of the jewelry store here, and that's why we have Pocket Park now. And you can see actually better in this picture. This is jewelry store and the hotel. This is going down South Broad toward Washington Street, Mr. Corn's house here. Milner Acock's, Pinnacle Bank, and the courthouse. This is the other side of Walton Hotel. I think Monroe Drug was probably still in there then. And down on Spring Street, devastating. Fire department, the whole roof was blown off of that. Cemetery. This was a wholesale company. And there was a gas station here. That's where the ice machine, big ice machine is now. But all of this is gone. Peters and Foster's, and Matthew Talbot Nunley's statue was knocked off a pedestal. And we lost the Monroe sign on top of the water tank. This is right above the library and going down Spring Street. And we've been through a few wars. The Civil War, this is Mr. Garrett, who's the last surviving Confederate veteran in Walton County. And some pictures of other Confederate veterans. World War I. These were veterans of World War I. This picture was made in 1961 at the Veterans Memorial in Rest Haven Cemetery. Going back to the Civil War for a moment, we didn't really have fighting that took place in Monroe. There was a cavalry raid. There was some Yankee cavalry came into town, and they ransacked Calvin Nowell's general store, which was about the only business that was in town by that time and during that period of time. But really not any fighting per se. The devastation to Monroe was in the loss of life and injuries, and you know, the devastation to the economy. World War II, these are all the men. I think these are actually Walton County, not just Monroe, but this is a VFW memorial. And then Vietnam. And then something a little better, we take a look at Monroe's first gymnasium, which we happen to be sitting in right now. This gentleman, John Denton, came to Monroe in 1925 at the age of 19. And he was hired to teach math and science. He was also the band director, at least the girls' basketball coach for Monroe High School. I'm not sure whether he coached boys or not. I don't know that. But John, I guess, was tired of playing basketball outside. So he, a little later than this, he was named principal and superintendent of schools. I think he was at the ripe old age of 29 by then. And he organized an effort to build Monroe's first gymnasium. Gratis at a gym. We didn't. So kind of embarrassing, I guess, you know. But anyway, this was a groundswell volunteer effort. Almost all the labor was volunteer. The materials were given. The final cost of the whole gymnasium was, I think, $2,500. And they built it in 2 months. All the Monroe High School boys gave a week of their Christmas vacation to work on the gym. This is Mr. Denton standing in front of the gym during part of the construction. The gymnasium was opened on February 14th, Valentine's Day, in 1933. And the tragic part of it is that just 2 months later, in April of 33, John Denton died of complications from appendicitis. And his funeral was held in this gymnasium. Standing room only. Did I asked y'all a while ago who played basketball in here? Yeah. But if you've seen this place 10 years ago, you'd have never thought it looked like this. I thought it'd be gone, but it's not, and we're grateful. Monroe's first railroad, and I'm going to talk now. It says right here Monroe's decade of growth. It's actually 2 decades, it's 20 years. But starting in about 1880, Monroe took off. We just kind of been sitting around after the Civil War with not much going on. And then in 1880, we got the Walton Railroad, which came here from Social Circle. So the Georgia Railroad went through Social Circle to Atlanta. And so now we had a spur coming up from there that would help us send stuff places and get stuff from places. This picture right here is actually a picture of the last narrow gauge railroad coming through Monroe, which was a bad thing. We had narrow gauge, and then we had regular or normal gauge, or whatever you call it. So if you were sending something, you had to take everything off one train, put it on another one to get it there. But finally they did away with all the narrow gauge and had regular gauge. In 1885, the W.H. Nunley Company opened. You may recognize that building. It's Monroe Mercantile now. And Mr. Nunley ran a business there until 1933 when he passed away. This is actually the sale that they had after his death, and the business was sold to Gallant & Belt. Gallant & Belt was the first air-conditioned business in downtown Monroe. And it was not in 1933, though. And then later it was Buckles Hardware, and I think Peters and Foster's was in there at one time, and now it's the Monroe Mercantile. The Walton Hotel was built in 1886. It was the largest and best hotel between Augusta and Atlanta. So a lot of people stayed there. A lot of salesmen would come. They had a room downstairs where the salesmen could show their goods and people could come in and buy them and all. It ceased to be a hotel in about 1920. the bottom floor had always been businesses. They had a dining room in the back and a kitchen, but there'd pretty much always been a barber shop on the end down here and other businesses, furniture. You see that says furniture store right there. But in 1920, they stopped renting rooms out, and these rooms upstairs were taken over as offices and things like that. In 1889, the Monroe Guiana Company came into being, and eventually became Monroe Oil and Fertilizer. This was the first corporation in Monroe where stockholders invested their money, and a business was formed rather than just an individual starting a business on his own, or two individuals. And then in 1891, Felker's Bank, which this is the way it looked when it was built before the hotel fell on top of it. And then today, Felker's Bank is our Pocket Park up there. George Felker ran that bank along with his nephew, I believe, Joseph Felker. I showed you his picture a while ago. He gave the land for the school. But it was not a corporation, it was a private bank, and they loaned their own money, which they must have had a lot of. You look at that vault they got there. But Bank of Monroe opened in 1891 on Spring Street. This building sat right behind what is the co-op, or the extension office now. And eventually the bank moved up to the corner of Broad Street and Spring Street. And that's J.R. Radford. He was the first of 5 members of the Radford family that served on the board of the Bank of Monroe. Bank of Monroe went on to be the National Bank of Monroe, then the National Bank of Walton County, and today it's Synovus. This is George Selman. I'm trying to read my notes and do this same time. In 1895, Monroe Mill, or as people in town call it, the Old Mill, was founded or built over on Madison Avenue, and gave work to hundreds of people. This picture was made in the 1930s. And then in 1896, we became a city. The town charter was surrendered, and we received a city charter, which allowed for much better organization of city government and mayor and city council and things like that. This is a picture of Monroe, and again, looking for things that we can date this by. Here's a street light. So it's after 1906 when we got electricity in Monroe. And this is just standing close to Washington Street and looking north. And if you look over here, this would be the Day Avery Company, and then the Niall Arnold Kelly. That's the 3 names I was trying to think of. This is, what is that? Rents is in there now. If you go in Rents and ask to use the restroom, you go in the restroom, the Niall Arnold Kelly safe is in their restroom. And then next up here is Breedlove's Hardware, and then the Farmers Bank on the corner. And if you cross Spring Street, this building, which is Coffee Camper now, that would have been Felker's Hardware. Joseph Felker owned that also. It had been originally been a livery stable. Fancy thing. It had an elevator. It's 2 stories. You could keep your carriage or your buggy or whatever in there, and horses, whatever. And then going on past that is the B.S. Walker block, which is 3 buildings with a tattoo parlor and Little Italy restaurant, and then one other that I don't know. Those 3 buildings. B.S. Walker, the man we mentioned a while ago, had originally owned the Opera House there. It was a 2-story wooden building, and nobody ever sang opera in there, but they had acts that would come to town, vaudeville, and even after, well, I won't say that now. But anyway, it was just entertainment upstairs. Downstairs, they had businesses in the downstairs. But in 1900, he sold that building to Coleman Mobley, and Coleman Mobley picked it up and moved it to Court Street. We moved a lot of buildings in Monroe. They wound up in different places where they started, but when it got to Court Street, they actually showed motion pictures in there. It was one of the first places that motion pictures were shown in Monroe. And then the W.H. Nunley Company, Monroe Mercantile, we mentioned a while ago. And then we'll go down the other side, courthouse, of course, right here. This was the Bank of Monroe on the corner, and next to that was a Walton Trading Company, which sold buggies, wagons, and organs. If you bought an organ, you had to have a wagon to get it home. And people give us a lot of stuff, you know, and we have close to 200 records from the Walton Trading Company, and it's fascinating to read these promissory notes where people come in, they pay $75 for an organ, but they didn't have the $75, and so they would promise that they'd give you the money from an acre of cotton that they were raising on land that they were renting from somebody in Jones County. And then you'd see this attachment where they didn't make the payment and they had to get a lawyer and, you know, foreclose on them or whatever. But it's fascinating to read some of those promissory notes. People just really wanted organs. All right, well, then in 1900, the Walton Mill, or as we know it, the new mill, opened on Broad Street. And that's still there, you know. And I want to share something with you now. A few years ago, we had a mill reunion. We had it down where Monroe Country Day was and Johnson Institute. And I interviewed a little lady, May Wallace, who worked at the mill. And she told me about working at the mill and what it meant to her. And hopefully the sound will work and she can tell you the same thing. We'll see. Can y'all hear that? Is that any better? Okay. Can somebody tell me where the speaker is on this thing? Oh, maybe this.
moved to Mill Street where my four-room house is now. It was $4.50 a week taken out of his check.
Oh, and you got that, baby.
We were such good hands, it wasn't too long till we got some promotions.
Yeah.
He was promoted to run the tying machine, and I was promoted to be a weaver.
Weaver is a top job.
Yeah. And we did very well after we got promoted, but we started out pretty slow. I wish some way, somehow, that you could go right down Mill Street. It's about 4 houses right down through there on Mill Street. I got into this time and lay off in full blow.
Ms. Wallace has passed on now. When I interviewed her, I think she was about 90 years old at that time. And I asked her if I could visit with her and talk some more. And she was living with her daughter. By then she'd had to move out of her house. But she said, yeah, you can come, just don't come on Tuesday, because Tuesdays I go and play the piano at the old folks' home. Okay, Farmers Bank opened in 1900 and didn't look like that. It was remodeled, I think, in 1940 or 41, and that exterior put on it. All of these things that happened in this 2-decade period from 1880 to 1900 were in large part brought about by cotton. Cotton has been king in Walton County. Walton County has been one of the top 2 or 3 counties in cotton production in the state of Georgia, going back, I guess, to the Civil War or thereabouts. And in addition to that, and when Anita Sams counted in 1960, there were 14 cotton gins in Walton County, one on just about every little community or crossroads in the county. This is a picture of Bradley's gin right here. In addition to that, we had 2 cotton mills. Not many towns had 2 cotton mills. I don't know if another town had 2 cotton mills, but we did, and they employed hundreds of people. And, Walton County at one time had 5 cotton mills. The oldest being the one at High Shoals, and then of course the 2 in Monroe. There was a cotton mill in Social Circle, and the cotton mill in Wyandotte actually was in Walton County when it was built, because as I mentioned, Bear County didn't exist then. And there were 4 or 5 what we call sewing plants, where ladies sat at sewing machines and made blue jeans and other garments, and those employed hundreds of people. This is a picture inside the Southeastern Manufacturing Company, which was on Lumpkin Street, where there's a city parking lot there now where that was. You may know some of those ladies. My mother worked at Carwood, which was on Midland Avenue. Okay, we're going to talk about the Monroe Girls Corps to finish up here. And the Monroe Girls Corps started out in 1949. The VFW hired Wayne Shields to be the director. He was the only director they ever had. And they existed into the 1980s. How many people in here were members of the Girls Corps? Like Carol was a charter member. Now, if you didn't live here during the time of the Girls Corps, it's hard for you really to realize what it meant to this town. But if you couldn't get away from it, you couldn't get around it, and it provided such an opportunity for the girls that were members of this organization. They traveled all over the eastern United States, and some of those girls probably never would have left this town until they were much older, had it not been for that organization. They played in every town in the state of Georgia. That might be an exaggeration, but if it is, it's a very small exaggeration. This picture here, this is in Social Circle. And they played in many of the towns in the southeast. This picture, they're in Mississippi at a dairy festival. They played in all the major cities in the east. This is the Lions Club parade in Chicago in 1953. They finished second. Now, in 1953, they'd only been in business 3 years, and the only reason they finished second was the judges didn't like their uniforms, which they changed the next year, and then finished first. They went 6 Macy's parades, first in 1959, the last in 1971. This picture is 1965. I could have chosen any of them, but this is my wife. And they did a concert at Carnegie Hall. Not something a lot of people can say. They were Lions Club International champions in 1959. And
The unique team of 41 lovely young ladies in the 6th through the 12th grades. They perform all over the country. They have a trophy case full of prizes and awards for fine ladies and news collections. Last evening they gave a concert at Carnegie Hall in New York. They're ready to go toward the beat and rehearse a routine all year long, even during the summer months. And all that practice pays off. Girls ago performed 17 years ago, and one of the artists who with respect to the crowd was the Eva Dillon Award presented to them by the United States Marine Corps. There they go.
I figured out a long time ago I could get around applause if I played the girls' club. All right, folks, that's it. And we'll be back in 2121. I'd like to see all y'all here at Tricentennial. I appreciate you being here today.
So the question would be, if a person wants to get ready for this streaming service,
Right.
they need to call you now and not wait till the last minute so they can get everything hooked up.
Absolutely. And feel free to talk to your neighbors. We want you to get what you need, and we want to be able to provide what you need. And I'm telling you, people are very honest with me about their thoughts and feelings on any changes that we make. A lot of folks don't like the fact that we're getting rid of cable TV, and I understand it. But in good conscience, I cannot charge our general fund a negative $500,000 a year. It's just not fair to it's not fair to anyone, especially those who choose to not have cable TV anyway.
If they have the cable and they want to do the streaming, will you be connecting the cable into streaming that they can get it into their house through their cable?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So it's
that's
just
a big question.
Well, the streaming is just internet based. So if they have cable internet, and we've not gotten fiber to that particular neighborhood yet, because we're a little more than 50% right now. Part of that is that we're still waiting for some equipment, but part of it is also that folks have just not scheduled it. They don't see the need, and if they don't see the need and that's working fine for them, that's fine with us, because as long as they are connected, the coax is not going away. It's just cable TV over the coax. So if they're doing internet TV right now, you won't see a change.
Okay.
More than happy to have you. I mean, more than happy to bring fiber to you, and more than happy to have you on our system. But if you're happy with DirecTV, Xfinity, Hulu, or YouTube, by all means, do it. We just want to provide an option. Plus, we really want folks to know that cable is going away August 5th. And specifically the reason for that is because we're just hemorrhaging money, and that we do have a replacement. And that's the main thing. It's a very, very good replacement.
If they've got their house wired for cable, and this comes in, and they've got their TVs hooked to the cable in the house, that won't work, will it?
No, sir.
Okay. So what they would need to do is get the fiber into their house, and then have Wi-Fi, and then it could communicate to their different TVs if they're smart TVs.
Right. And they don't even have to have the fiber for that. If they have coax cable and they don't want to connect with fiber, they can, as long as they have internet, they can continue to do what they do. They're just going to have to stream a different format, whether it's us, Hulu, YouTube, DirecTV, so on and so forth. But 5 TVs hooked up to our cable system will provide you snow, and that's about all that you'll ever see from us in the cable business again.
Okay, I think that's the questions I've been asking.
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Oh yes, thank
And
you for
we'll
yours.
get it. And if they're concerned, who would they call here at the city?
You probably talk to Todd. I would guess you can end up calling.
Is that Todd Leachman?
Todd Leachman,
Okay.
Mike McGuire, one of those guys. But all the team down at customer service will put you in the right area. So that number again is 770-266-5400. 770-266-5400. That'll lead you to customer service. We have been very, very busy as we're making this changeover. I'm not sure that we can hire enough people down there to pick up like that, but slow and methodically, we're getting there in the right direction.
If they have Windstream, they will still get streaming.
Right. If you have Windstream and you're happy with it, that by all means, stick with it. And if something goes wrong and you can't wait the 2 weeks, call us and we'll get you hooked up.
Okay. Well, this is Paul Mullins with Walton Entertainment. Now, I hope this interview with Mayor John Howard has helped you on what's going to happen. So basically, if you've got Windstream, you're still going to get streaming. And if you've got Monroe Cable, Monroe Streaming, you're going to have it. But if you've just got cable only, you're going to have to go to the internet. And for $69.95, Monroe will provide that. So again, call this number we've got up on the screen, and hopefully this answers questions.